Geert, already the last episode of the year. We actually managed to do a whole year of Lead Podcast every 2 weeks, and I think that is a real thing for us, right?
Yeah, it's quite an achievement. So congratulations to you as well.
Congratulations to you too. And I was looking at the statistics because we actually have statistics, and we are thinking the episodes where we had guests, they were actually liked a lot. So I was thinking, should we invite a guest?
Yeah, I think I can relate to that as well. Looking back at all the episodes that we did, 25 already, the ones that we had guests explaining their journey, what they went through, the actual stuff they went through and their experiences, those were one of the best listened to episodes. So for that, I got a guest this week. Cool. So let's start the podcast.
Okay, let's do it.
The Lead Podcast, a podcast for leaders in engineering, architecture, and development.
So welcome, Rob Heckel from Toyota Connected. Well, we met at KubeCon several weeks ago, where you already explained a bit about your journey more in a technical way. But this got me triggered on the journey that you went through as a company. Could you explain a bit about yourself and the company Toyota Connected? What's the vision about that?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. I work for Toyota Connected North America. We actually have divisions throughout the world. And so we're kind of an innovation arm within the Toyotaverse, if you will. Our vision is to advance the way people move, connect, and experience the world. So that's pretty big and daunting vision, but that's what we're aiming to tackle. And our mission is really innovation to shape meaningful journeys. And so we have 3 product divisions within our org, one of which handles a lot of the telematic data. Another handles the actual voice assistant inside of the vehicles. And then another division handles the SOS button. And so the safety calls and things like that. So really out there saving lives. I've been with Toyota Connected as a senior engineer for 2.5 years. Linux sysadmin background with a passion for software development and developer enablement. Also had come from a background of leadership as well, where previously for 7 or 8 years, I have had various titles that ended up being platform and site reliability engineering management. So managing a couple different teams there. And in my copious amounts of spare time, I like to spend it with my family and racing cars. So,
okay,
yeah,
nice.
Thanks for having me.
Still in the car, in your personal things, there are still cars involved. Because I was directly thinking Toyota Connected. Of course, I had this association at first with the Toyota, so that is a car company. But I think as it goes with a lot of companies, you are far from being a car company alone, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Right now, like when we really look into Toyota Connected, we're focused on software and some of the hardware as well inside of the vehicles. So, yeah, and what to do with all that data, what sort of insights can we get? So, yeah, very exciting time to be in kind of like an IoT space and everything else.
Yeah. Yeah. So how many people are working? And then I mean not only just people within Toyota, but more on the software engineering or technical side of things that we are talking about.
I would say from our side, anywhere between, we'd say about 500 engineers just within our organization. And our organization as a whole is probably around 1,000 engineers, or not engineers, but 1,000 individuals.
So that's for Toyota Connected in North America or in all the regions together?
Yeah, that's going to be North America specifically.
Okay, and then in North America, you have these 3 components that you work on, and in different countries, you work on different. So you actually have certain value streams that you own from beginning to end. Is that the idea?
Yes, that's correct. And a lot of times we work with the other teams to ship a complete product, right? So yeah, and at the end of the day, we all end up rolling up into Japan. So yeah.
So if you look at the things that you are doing within Toyota Connected, 500 developers, so it's quite a large organization in itself doing basically software engineering. So what are I'm thinking, well, how did you get started with this journey? Because moving from a car company only to becoming a software company, that is a whole thing, and now you are in a position. So maybe take us back in time, or maybe start with where you are right now, and reasoning back on how did you get here?
As far as how did we get into a platform, or how did the organization as a whole become a thing?
Maybe start there. Like how did you set up this organization, and how did you make eventually the decision to start doing platforms?
Yeah, so I think obviously this happened quite a few years before I joined the team, but basically a number of individuals from Toyota said, hey, we've got a lot of red tape that we need to adjust, and it sometimes can maybe slow us down a bit. And so we need to pull in a lot of talent and kind of operate like a scrappy startup. And so a couple individuals bought office space, and they were on kind of a shoestring budget. They came over from Toyota Motors North America, and just kind of started, getting to work, taking different initiatives and putting themselves out there to capture new initiatives, right? And so you're talking about a team that started relatively small. I want to say maybe 10, 20 people initially, right? And so over the years, this is where we've grown to. And obviously, when you start talking about platform engineering and the need in general for platforms, it happens a lot of times when you have that degree of holistic growth, and maybe things that should be standardized aren't standardized. And so, like I said, we have 3 different teams, and maybe all 3 of those teams are going in different directions, right? But maybe they're trying to capture the same, do the same things, just different ways. And so obviously that turns into quite a bit of operational overhead, right? And so initially we started out building our own internal developer platform, I would say. Somebody looked at it a long time ago and said, oh, Backstage, this looks pretty cool, but it's complicated.
You mean Backstage, the Spotify grown developer platform, right?
Correct. So Spotify's Backstage, the internal developer platform, IDP, is what I don't necessarily. I differentiate between platforms and portals, right? So I would say that Backstage is more of a portal, in my opinion, and really a framework. But we'll get to that, down the line. And so we initially started out with our original one that we built in-house on Python, because Backstage was still in its infancy and very hard to stand up. And so we built a simple website, and you were able to request things like an AWS account, Okta groups, that kind of stuff, right? That was all built in-house, just because it was a pain point at the time. People didn't like waiting, lots of approvals and things like that. And if you're a scrappy startup, you shouldn't have to go through all that, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it was really solving like the first major bottlenecks that occur within development teams. Like, we want to do stuff ourselves, but we cannot do it. We constantly have to go through all these hoops and people and wait times, etc. So build something that people can use to actually self-service themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, we got good use out of that. But when you start wanting to deliver more and more things, when you start really looking at your ecosystem and all the different technologies within it, there's more than just an AWS account, right? And maybe instead of provisioning things, you want to see metrics, you want to see everything intermingled together and get a better understanding of how everything's working. And I think that's kind of where you diverge from your Python application in a web browser to something that's a little more featureful, right? So that's how we got here.
it's often a dangerous step, I think, because I see this happening a lot at companies where they start off with this simple project where you can just request some stuff and get going. What I see happening a lot is when this holistic system takes over, it is becoming to be enforced on all the teams. Is that something you do at Toyota as well, or?
Well, We don't enforce it necessarily. It's just you have to align it so that it's the easiest path, right,
Yeah.
to getting a thing. Can you run around and ask for certain resources? Yeah, you can absolutely do that. But why do it? You have to make things super easy for everybody to consume and provision, right? So that it becomes, well, just use, whatever the name of your IDP is. Ours is Maestro. So if you hear me refer to Maestro, it's like, there's the features inside of Maestro. Go use Maestro. It's just the easiest way to get it all set up. Don't look back. It's not as much enforced as it is. Well, this is the way to do it now. So
Do you remember the momentum? Because I think the pivotal point, what Geert says, it may be dangerous, but I think that a lot of companies, many of those already have something like some scripts, some pipelines lying around that do some automation stuff. But there is this pivotal point where you decide as an organization, okay, we are going away from our homegrown stuff and we are taking it one step more professional. Like you choose Backstage, but there are a lot of other things that you can do, or maybe ramp up a complete development team to do something in-house. So do you remember the pivotal point where you made that decision, like, okay, now we need to really do something different than building on top of the homegrown tools that we created?
yeah, I would say really getting the exposure to all the different backstages at reInvent 2023.
Yeah.
I ended up in a lot of platform engineering talks, and everybody was talking about Backstage or a derivative of Backstage, right? And at that point, it just kind of clicked. Look at all the different features that they have, and how long would that take me to build in-house, or how long would it take our team to build this stuff in-house? And to have so many different software engineers out there hammering on this and contributing to it, it's the promise of open source, right? I have hundreds of developers out there working on the same things that I'm working on, as opposed to 6 developers in-house working on this, right? And obviously the extensibility, as opposed to just leaning into like a single web framework inside of Python, it makes sense. There weren't like really teething issues or anything like that. It's just when we start talking about what's next for the platform or the portal for that, just to say the portal, that's where it really started to say, okay, well, maybe it makes sense to build upon a framework that is more extensible.
Yeah.
So.
And how do you connect with your audience, your developers, because they already had this web portal to do request certain simple things, and now, well, turning that into more holistic interface where you do everything around your application. How did you know you were working on the right things that people were actually waiting for?
Yeah, that's a really good question, right? Because if you just go through like a Backstage plugin catalog, you can integrate it with just about everything, right? But what are the actual pain points? And so what we did was go into each of the 3 teams and begin discussions both with engineering leaderships and from, I would say, the bottom up as well. So we had our leaders speaking to one another, and then you had engineers also speaking to each other. And so what everybody wanted were different things. So what an engineering leader wants is going to be different than what an engineer wants. And so that's really where we started. And you kind of have to watch out, because sometimes the problems that are presented are either solved within a system that already exists in your organization, or they're kind of like one-hit wonders. Like, once I clean everything up with this one time, like say you have a tool that finds old merge requests or something like that, what's the reusability of that? Come back next year and take a look at it and make sure the numbers aren't where they were the year before, right? Are we making progress? I think that's the most important thing, is just talking to the different personas. And sometimes the personas expand beyond just engineers and engineering leads. But also be mindful not to turn it into kind of like a SharePoint, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you also see the benefits already in your organization of using this developer platform? We have had a guest here before from the Lego Group. They use Backstage also heavily, customized it fully, and they see huge productivity benefits. But they also build all kinds of compliancy and insights on top of the metrics they already have. So how do you deal with that stuff?
I'm going to be 100% honest with you here. The uptake of the application isn't as much as we would like it to be. And I think that's pretty much because everybody right now is busy. And so how do you allocate time to onboard all of your different systems into another system, and to what benefit? Is it making a profit for us to build this? It's very, you have to look at the soft cost down the line. And so that's really where it gets into beginning to look at metrics and different things like that. So far, we've seen a lot of contributions into the system, and it also, one of the big things that we've started doing was capturing inner sourcing, different opportunities for inner sourcing. So if a team needs something that could benefit the entire organization, we start throwing things inside of there. As far as what we've found so far, a lot of interest in automation. And so, onboarding new engineers. I think that's probably been one of our big wins so far, right?
Yeah.
What Okta groups does everybody need to be in? What security groups does everybody need to be in? I think this is a common problem across all engineering organizations. Nobody starts on day one and just has access to everything that they need, right? So I think that's also one of those low-hanging fruit things. Like, let me share a little bit of the secret sauce with you, tackle that one if it is a problem inside of your organization. And all of a sudden, you'll start to see, just with that level of access, you should see quicker time to contributions back, right? I don't think any engineering leader wants to see their investments take months before they begin contributing back into the system.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, of course. And do you have any metrics on like certain automations, like how often do they run, or those kind of things? Because that it could be quite an easy calculation of let's say if I would normally request such an Okta group with a ticketing system before you had all this, right? It could take a couple of hours at least, right, for each go, and now it's in several minutes. So you could say, well, with each request, we at least save 1 hour. And if you say, oh, we have 1,000 groups created, that's 1,000 hours saved, right? So do you have any kind of such insights?
The only insights we really had, and this goes back to the AWS accounts, right? It would take 3 to 4 days for a new AWS account to be spun up before people could begin working on it. And so now we're able to provision them, assuming you have your approval within a relatively short amount of time. They can be provisioned in a matter of, I would say, about 20, 30 minutes. And so that reduces quite a bit of time. And yeah, as far as metrics go, we started out with the basic metrics, especially with the new portal, where we started tracking basic metrics such as visits and what people are using, which endpoints, which tools they're using. And so, yeah, I will admit that that's not the best path. And that's something that we're hammering on now, is what metrics actually matter and how do we track those metrics, right? So yeah, at this point, I don't have anything good beyond the AWS numbers to present you, and I don't have them handy either. So I'm sure somebody else on my team that hears this will say, "Oh, we had the Okta automation that saves 36 hours per engineer."
But maybe it's also nice, for me, a nice segue into you mentioned we talk about portal, that is more the backstage stuff that you can do and make it insightful. But there is also the platform, because there is probably more you do as a platform team. So what is it beyond like the portal and doing the automation for that? How and what you are doing with platforms?
Yeah, and also a little bit about the why you made the choices for these kind of solutions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the platform is everything. And that's kind of what I've been driving home lately. All of your technical systems, so your cloud accounts, right? that's part of the platform. You run Kubernetes, that's part of the platform. We use Datadog for monitoring, right? No, I don't think there's any secret. We speak there, everything like that. That's part of the platform. I'm trying to think of what other things, right? Uh, Majorly, we try to stay very native to the cloud and run inside of Kubernetes. And if we can't run inside of Kubernetes, we do a lot of Lambda work, right? And so that how do you integrate all of those different, which could be considered platforms in and of themselves, right? How do you integrate all of those platforms together? And so those are the things that we tackle. Why do we have, maybe 5 different versions of Kubernetes running across the organization? And so how do you adjust to that? Well, you start coming together, and I think as a socio-technical system, just having Backstage within our organization has opened up the communication channels where we can start coming to those decisions together as all of our individual organizations, right? So although we do have a platform team, we have multiple platform teams, just like we have multiple software development teams. And so what they may build as a platform might be a data analytics platform. And so what do? We integrate with that, and we put that into Backstage. And so if other teams start getting into the data and analytics space, we say, okay, well, here's something that Team X made. Why don't you give that a shot and see if it would work for you, or maybe just minor adjustments, right?
So making also the platform visible through a tool like Backstage in this case can also really help in finding the right things, and maybe also even help in deciding whether to buy a tool or to build a tool or all those things.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you touched on something pretty near and dear to my heart: buying versus building, right?
Okay.
And so when we looked into buying and building, right, there's a lot of different things out there that say, yeah, we're a platform, we're IDP, we're this, that, or the other thing. At the end of the day, you're going to end up making customizations to a system. And if you start looking into the different vendors that offer you something along those lines, especially if it's built on top of Backstage, I just feel like you're going to need to build a plugin of your own at some point. And so whether or not that vendor X, Y, or Z allows you to add a custom plugin, you're always going to run into kind of hiccups there. And if you want to deploy this thing inside of a private network, then you're going to get into hiccups there, right? A lot of these are kind of, what do you say, like a aggregator of systems, so to speak, right? And so if all of your systems are inside of a private network, well, the cracks begin to show automatically, right?
In the demos, they all look great, right? Because that's all Hello World things connected to each other. But then next to like combining all in one view, there's also the orchestration of things like, I want to create this AWS account, but it also needs to create an Okta account first, and it needs 10 things to happen all in the right order before you actually can create all these kind of things, right? That's also where most of the complexity will be, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where things like retries and all that stuff that's baked into some of the different tools that are purchased might make sense. I am hesitant to dive too much into those tools just yet. I would like to see an initial kind of the automations out of the box being adopted, so that we understand more on the difficulty on maintaining said automations, and what the other platforms would present us. Because at the same time, whether you build inside of YAML on your own, or you're building with APIs versus clicking and dragging things inside of a tool that you've bought off the shelf, that still comes with maintenance and a learning curve. So you really have to, leaders need to be mindful of what their team is capable of as well, and what sort of maintenance responsibilities they want to take on in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, so that triggered me as well. On you mentioned maintenance. We all talk a lot about engineering cultures in this podcast and DevOps, and so platform teams. Usually, it's our different teams that have a sole responsibility on the platform. Sometimes we see also teams that take a lot of the ops responsibility that used to be ops in the past. So how did you organize that? Are there DevOps teams, or is there a specialized ops team? So how do you do that?
Yeah, so each of our three divisions has its own DevOps teams. They have their own, some of them have their own platform teams as well. And so that's where I was talking about
Yeah.
like the data platform. For us, the way we organized originally, we took the two members from our Portal team, the original Python team, and we took three members from our cloud engineering team, which included myself. We put them in, and so you're getting that cross-functional bit where you have developers accounted for, you have system engineers. I'll just call them system engineers so that we're not calling people DevOps engineers. I know it's kind of like a bad word.
Thank you for that.
And then obviously we had like a product team, and we tried to work in some degree of Scrum and stuff like that. And so we went ahead and ramped up, built our initial prototype and implementation in 4 months. And now we've all pretty much gone back to our own teams. The Portal team is managing the Backstage instance. Where things get interesting is the collaboration between engineering leaders and kind of like the senior engineers between the different silos.
Yeah.
And we all get together and kind of we've started an ADR process, and so we're doing our architecture decision reviews and requests for comments, right? And we're getting a lot of good feedback and traction there, so that we come together and we can build those standards. And on once you have the standards, right? Because there is no innovation without standardization. Once you have those standards, now we're able to start working together to build like what should a Kubernetes cluster look like?
Yeah.
What are the bare necessities that we need inside of our organization? And so it really, the reporting lines have got pretty blurry, right? We're all working together, and one day I might be answering questions for one leader, and another day I might be answering questions for another leader and working on things bouncing back and forth, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really opened up that kind of flat hierarchy.
Yeah,
right,
that's
where we all
really
start
nice.
working together.
That's we talked about this a lot, where we always like the autonomy of certain groups to do their own thing, right? But in the end, you also need a certain aligned autonomy where everyone can do their own thing, but they are all running in the same direction, right? And that's where standardization can come in, which does work for each of the individuals or the departments. So you can actually get the benefits of that standardization and still can do your own thing in that regard.
Yeah, and that's always the interesting thing, right? Standardization and differentiation. And so like where do you focus on the standards, right? And you kind of start thinking about, you kind of have to look at each team's end goal and work your way backwards, right? So if one of the outputs of your team is a Kubernetes cluster that runs multiple different workloads, right? Well, how do they get there? So you might have one team open tofuing, you might have another team over there still on Terraform, you might have another team that's using like a Pulumi derivative or something crazy like that, right? Maybe crossplane, all these different technologies for doing the same thing. And so what happens there, right? You begin to dilute your engineering efficiency and the talents within your organization, right? Because everybody's working on the same thing, they're just doing it in a different way.
Yeah.
And really, I mean, here you were at the talk. That's where I started getting into like certain parts of the SDLC and even the operations lifecycle. That's really, there's certain parts that need to be commoditized, and the more you commoditize, the more you can start focusing on the differentiation.
Yeah, the Kubernetes cluster itself is not a differentiator, right? It's just something that you need, and everyone needs to run their stuff. But it's not gonna make Toyota stand out to other companies, right? It's just the electricity and the water and all the stuff that just needs to be there, so your teams can actually build upon that with their great differentiating software.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, that let's make our operators have an easier time troubleshooting things, allow for a little bit of movement between teams if need be. So if we're all familiar with the same work in the architectures that we're doing, at least from an infrastructure perspective, it's very easy for team X to go to team Y and help out when they're in a pinch, or if they need to focus more on delivering a new feature or function, well, maybe we can offset their operations load for them, right? And I think that's where you start to really see those benefits come out from actually performing like platform duties and acting like a platform engineering team. That's my
so maybe also to start wrapping up a bit, because we are already half an hour in. You talked about a lot of things, platforms, and also the portal, and already mentioned a little bit of the struggles that you overcome. So do you have any tips for companies that are in the beginning of their journey? They are maybe just setting up their first tools to start automating some stuff. So where do you get started with this as a team or as an organization? What are your tips there?
Yeah, I think where to get started. Look around and see, talk to people, figure out who the personas are that you want to focus in on, and determine what needs improvement. I kind of run around and just kind of ask people, right, what sucks? Like what is like the bane of your day? What slows you down? Where do you find friction? And that helps you start building your goals. That's before you even touch a piece of software, right? Understand what you're trying to solve for. And then once you have those goals, start small. Figure out whether or not there are tools within your current ecosystem that might already solve as the platform and as the IDP. I kind of like harped on SharePoint a little bit, but maybe SharePoint, you have really crazy SharePoint developers that can integrate all this stuff. Maybe you're a hardcore Microsoft shop and it makes sense. Go for it. Try something that isn't a lot of incredibly different and uncanny to the organization, right? That way there's comfort. And then obviously cross-functional teams I alluded to, work on that. Make sure you have people from different backgrounds and personas, because what's important to an engineering leader isn't important to an engineer necessarily, and that may not be important to finance. Right. And then, just look to the open source and be sure to leverage the community where and when possible.
Yeah, and I liked your stuff that you just mentioned in between sentences, but I really liked that sentence where you said standardization is needed to start innovation. And I think that is also maybe not even for platforms, but far broader than that, like start focusing a little bit on standards within your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, that goes back to just automation days, right? You can't automate what there is no standard for. Otherwise, you're never going to deliver what an individual wants or needs, or, what the company wants. So,
and I fully agree with you on the area where you say just talk to people, but it seems a very simple advice, but it's often overlooked at a lot of companies who start doing things like platform engineering, often from more of an operational perspective, and they just, we're going to build a platform, and hey, nobody's using our platform. It's like, because it doesn't do what the people actually need, right? It's not solving the problems that they have in their day-to-day business, and that's just a waste of time.
The build it and they will come fallacy, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna say there aren't times when you have to do that though, right? Like Henry Ford was attributed to saying, if I had asked the people what they wanted, they would have asked for faster horses. Sometimes there are things out there that teams aren't aware of that will help the organization. So use your best judgment as well. Sometimes you might have a spark that ignites a fire throughout the organization as well.
Yeah, but to get adoption really working, I would first start with giving them something they actually want, and from there on build upon those extra innovations or standardizations that help the org in a broader way, instead of solving those those small fires that individuals have, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But if you can find proponents that are passionate about different things, and allies that are going to go out and talk on your behalf, leverage those all day long, right?
Yeah. Great. So yeah, thank you very much. I think it was really insightful, Rob, and great to see how and hear how Toyota is doing it in North America. So thank you for all this insights.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll also link in the KubeCon video where you talk a bit more about the technicalities of the platform, etc., that you built. So that might also be useful for a certain listener. We'll put those in the show notes. And well, thanks for being our last guest of the year.
Yeah, thank you very much. Enjoy your days, your Christmas and your New Year, and then
Likewise.
Yeah.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a wrap for us.
Yeah.
I guess, Rene.
So let's end this year. Well, happy holidays to all the listeners too, and hope to see you next year again. Thank you, Rob, and thank you, listeners. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
The Lead Podcast, a podcast for leaders in engineering, architecture, and development.